Be sure if we're actually live and it's actually going to record what I'm saying right now. So let me go check real quick. Alright, everybody, welcome back to Not the Good Ones. You may know me as Stony MT or simply as Moses on YouTube. So today, we're going to be continuing reading troll pastas and creepypastas. It's not even just creepypastas anymore, it's just this weird. I don't even know what to call it, but you know what it is. We did it last time, it was super freaky. And now we have suggestions from my friends, both online and in real life, even some from my own mom when I asked her to look through the creepypasta wiki, or it used to be called Geoshio, whatever it's called now, I don't even know anymore. I'm too lazy to check again. And I showed her a bunch of random ones, and she decided which one is going to be one of our great selections for today. So that's pretty cool. So we got Room Zero, and there's a prequel to that, or I think that one originally came out first. But I'm more acquainted with Room Zero, which has to do with Disney, but I haven't read it for a long time. That one was suggested again by my friend Jamie. And then we got Return to Oz, which was suggested by Oxen Boy. The Disappearance of Ashley, Kansas, which I remembered from years ago, but I didn't even bother going to check that one again. That one isn't a suggestion, so yeah, we're already cheating in this list, huh? And then the strangest security tape I've ever seen, which was suggested by Scott. The story of Kanye West, which is a very short story, which I found just randomly, so I guess we'll read that out loud because it rhymes, so I guess that automatically constitutes humor. Am I right, everybody? Sonichu.exe, suggested by Toby. Sonic the Hedgehog. And the 5-foot jobs, suggested by Maddie. And the COVID vaccine makes me sexy, which is a different story I found online. So I think we should do the COVID vaccine one first, because already just reading that out loud just makes me feel very gross inside. And who wrote this? Wait, hold on. This was written by someone named the Cuck Chair, so there are zero comments. And it was last edited 2 years ago by Trollpasta Bot. That is not promising. I remember when the vaccine first came out. Wait, hold. No, there's an author's note. I forgot. I'm not one of those stupid Jew conspiracy theorist believers. I just wrote this as an absurdist joke. Are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? Because I already see a little bit of your beginning paragraph here, and I'm already seeing sweet nectar, so let's see. I remember when the vaccine first came out and all the girls that were mean to me in high school kept talking about how it would kill you or implant a microchip in your brain so the government could watch you as a suicidal as a suicidal exhibitionist. Super misspelled. With a power imbalance kink, both of these possibilities appealed to me, so I got the vaccine 13 times. I would disguise myself as my friends. What? What? I would disguise myself as my friends and use their IDs just to get the sweet, sweet nectar into my veins. So people like getting vaccines for fun. Wait, hold on. I'll be right back real quick. Okay, that was a long gap, or at least it felt like it, so... Let's get back to the story. I'm gonna go back a little bit, so... Anyways, where's the nectar part? I would disguise myself as my friends and use their IDs just to get the sweet, sweet nectar into my veins. I would break into hospitals and hold the staff hostage so I could load the vaccine into a pipe and smoke it like it was my last of that blue Walter White crap. Next part. Exhibitionist. My God. I don't even know. Already the next paragraph. Oh my God. Excuse me. Okay. However, the other morning I woke up and realized something. It has been over 2 years and I am still alive. And also the government has never told me I look pretty or even sent me flowers. I also noticed that my ass had grown 3 sizes. It wasn't an illusion. It literally looked like as if Dr. Miami had snuck into my room at night and given me a BBL. I also noticed that my skin had cleared up and the bunion on the side of my right foot was gone. I immediately went out to buy a pair of same size shoes and fought my big new behind. It was all fine and good until I woke up for realsies. I bolted upright in a panic only to feel a hand rub my shoulder lovingly. I rolled over to the side of the bed where the United States government was curled up next to me. It was just a bad dream, honey. Maybe your chip got knocked out of place. I promise you're still ugly and will die soon. I know it was just a dream, but I've been getting them more and more lately. Has this happened to anyone else since getting the vaccine? I emailed Fox News about it, but they only responded with the full-length video of Ben Shapiro reviewing the Barbie movie. Please help. That was shorter than I expected, so because of the fact that it was so swift, let's go with the story of Kanye West, because I think that one's even shorter. And for whatever reason, this is labeled a haiku. After a long day of work, Kanye West goes to his Kanye nest to take his Kanye rest. He wakes up feeling his Kanye best. Then he will get Kanye dressed on his Kanye vest to go on a Kanye quest. He goes to church and becomes Kanye blessed, then to a hotel room to be a Kanye guest. Then to school to take his Kanye test. He forgot to brush his teeth. Did he run out of Kanye Crest? His neighbors... Wait, isn't Crest a mouthwash? Or are there multiple variations of dental hygiene products from Crest, like the brand? I don't even know. I'm not going to question. I'm just going to pretend that this dude just decided, oh yeah, I'm going to use the mouthwash company instead. That's a lot more fun to imagine. Anyways, his neighbor stole it. What a Kanye pest. He then put on some Axe for some Kanye zest and goes to the bar puffing out his Kanye chest. He gets drunk into a Kanye mess and goes home to the Kanye West part of town. He realized his life was a wreck and was feeling a little Kanye depressed. My life sucks, he Kanye digressed. He decided to get some Italian. He flew to Kanye Trieste. He got some pasta and started a Kanye digest. You should get some. Kanye rest, his wife Kanye pressed. Instead, he went to a Kanye fest. He didn't realize he needed to go to Dallas for his competition, so he went to the airport and hopped on Kanye Southwest. Got some Kanye rest, and the next morning he was... on the day of the competition, he was feeling a little Kanye stressed. But in the end, the judges were Kanye impressed. For his performance, he was awarded with the Kanye chest, clearly identified with the Kanye crest. There ends the story of Kanye West. And there are 2 comments. It's just Kanye best and then just Kanye. Man. That's the greatest thing I've ever read in my life. Alright, let's go with Room Zero. Okay, I remember the name Slime Beast, but... What was the original story? It has to be listened here. This is a sequel to Abandoned by Disney, so... I'm contemplating whether or not we should read Abandoned by Disney first, or if we just go with Room Zero, just to act like as if this is like a Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul situation. You know, let's just do Room Zero first. A lot has been going on since my last post. I've received a lot of questions and concerns from folks who read my first-hand account of Mowgli's Palace, a resort that was built and abandoned by Disney. Period. Without any spacing, so directly after the period, it already says it's. It's been a while. You know what's weird? These super short troll pastas had no grammatical errors whatsoever besides exhibitionist. And this is already gonna be very bad. It's gonna be a more interesting story, but there are gonna be more grammatical errors than low effort crap. That's sad, man. And how long has it been since we started the stream? Let's see. 11 minutes. Man, dude. Anyways, it's been a while since I've written anything related to Disney Corporation, and I'm sure you can understand why. I want to thank everyone who mirrored my post. It's been taken down from a few places, mostly corporate sites, so we're easily leaned on by a large power. And for every new topic or disappearing blog post, it seemed like 100 more popped up. This is something they'll have to face. There's no turning back for them. None for me either. I'm definitely being followed. For the first month or two, I chalked it up to paranoia, and any casual glance or half smile in my direction set me off. Hairs were standing on my back of the neck and everything. The first one, or rather the first one I was actually able to spot, was a telephone worker miling around just my apartment complex. He was middle-aged, doughy, dressed just as you'd expect, but something just seemed off about him. I couldn't place it, but I knew this wasn't just my imagination acting up. He was awkward and out of place, not somebody who was comfortable doing his routine job. I followed him around a corner only to lose him there. When I turned back to go home, there he was, staring directly at me, about 10 feet behind me. Expressionless and cold. Exploring, he asked? That was all he said, and there was an accusing tune to his... Tune? There was an accusing tune to his voice. Tell me, what blue-collar phone jockey does that? I guess that's the worst part. Never feeling safe, never feeling alone. That, and the occasional Disney merchandise left somewhere for me to find. Little rubber Mickeys in the mailbox, a Disney Adventures magazine on my bookshelf. They hide little Mickeys everywhere. 3 circles, 1 big, 2 small, and the silhouette of famous Mouse's head. I've started keeping a running list of Mickeys I found. Coffee cup rings on my coffee table, 1 big, 2 small, colored glass bottles left on the doorstep, viewed from the top down. Graffiti on the wall on my way to work, a huge earth, small sun and moon in proper locations. They are everywhere. People have emailed me about this as well. If you're posting anything out to say, you're going to start finding these son of a B-word outlines. I guarantee it. The best one by far, one that actually made me laugh because of the horror of it all, was drawing in chalk next to my car. I was taken aback at first, walking through the parking garage, keeping an eye out for people following me. The outline seemed a perfect match for, well, a murder victim. You're probably familiar with it if you've read my past post. We need to check that, man. But it'll make it more interesting if we do this first again. Anyways, written in yellow paint, I'm sure, was a single word. Retract. The only good thing that has come out of all this is that I know I'm not the only one who's seen something they shouldn't have. I'm not going to give their names because, well, if I have to tell you why, you haven't been paying attention. Researcher goes to Disney parks whenever he can, all throughout the year. He's not going to have fun, enjoy the rides, etc. He's looking for the gaskets. There's been a long tradition, apparently, of people reporting strange patrons throughout the park. Silent, motionless, staring patrons of every age, shape, and size. Men and women, adults, children, and teens, all wearing Disney-themed gas masks. Way back when, Disney would get tons of complaints about oddly dressed folks following others around the park. Folks who would then merge into crowds and disappear. Later on, the gas masks caused folks to draw other conclusions, and reports of possible terrorists and bombers started flowing. Oh my god. All of those reports most likely went straight into the trash can. I know I can't find any sign of any such occasions reported on by the media, although I should be aware of the fact that Disney can pretty much control its press like no other. Researcher goes to the parks, talks to a few people, and tries not to draw any attention to himself. He'll just ask 3 or 4 families if they've seen his friend who's wearing a funny mask. Oh my god, I'm gonna burp again. Excuse me, man. That probably sounds even worse. It sounds even worse on the mic. Anyways, He has yet to see a gasket for himself, though on one occasion a child pointed him toward Frontier Town. As he raced throughout the crowd, he heard a single voice ahead cry out, "Mommy, I want a goofy air mask too." A fellow I'll call lifeguard worked in a Disney water park from 2001 through 2003. He stood at the top of a huge water slide and made sure none of the kids got too rowdy. Passed the kids through one at a time, telling them over and over again to be safe, keep their arms in, and so on and so on. One day, as he tells it, this fat kid goes down the tube and doesn't come out the other end. He'd sent 2 or 3 kids after. The whole thing moves at a steady clip, so naturally you'd expect that if Fatty got stuck, the kids that followed him were stuck too. Not so. Only the big kid disappears. Everyone else comes out the other end, cheering and splashing like nothing's wrong. Lifeguard shuts down the slide, much to the aggravation of the kids waiting. Before he can go through this... Why is it so horrible in this one? This one isn't, like, really anything funny. But I'm gonna do it. Before he can go through any of Disney's strict procedures, splash! Fatty finally comes out. Staff members pulled the kid out of the water. He sank like a stone when he hit. His skin already blue and his eyes wide. All he would say was, "No face, kids," and stop squeezing. Kid was okay. In case you're wondering, he got carted right off to the medical center. When lifeguard was told to open the slide back up, he made a big stink about how it clearly wasn't safe. Despite his complaints, however, he was threatened with firing and begrudgingly opened slide again. From that point on, he kept a closer eye on the kids. Every so often, they'd come out in the wrong order, never stunned as the fat kid, but always with a vague look of concern. A dreamy half-stupor that seemed as if they were trying to figure out what was reality. They'd take on some water and choke a bit, and they'd never come back up to ride again. I read his emails with the same sort of unease you might be feeling right now. I wanted him to share his own story. But in the end, he didn't want to expose himself that way, and I cannot say I blame him. Snow White, which wasn't the actual role she played, was a character in the park. She had a nice little tidbit for me. You know what happens when a costume employee drops dead in the suit? Like 1 second he's taking a picture of little Jimmy, and the next he's had a fatal stroke. A second costume mascot in the area has to sit with the corpse on a curb or bench and wait for a designated dry cleaner, quote-unquote, to arrive and cart the body away in a discreet manner. All the while, patrons have no idea they're sitting with a dead body for photo ops. Feel free to check your photo albums at this point. That was bad, but another fellow janitor went completely off the creepy charts. Disney World, and probably others, quote-unquote, is built with a series of underground... Oh my god. Guys, the Jews are gonna come out from the underground tunnels in New York, like those fake videos, everyone. Series of underground tunnels just below your feet. 3 stories worth. Mike Geronimo reference, everyone. Anything Jay-Z reference, anything and everything you can imagine is down there for use of the employees. They're called utilitors. Utility corridor. Why are all of the semi-complex words so horribly misspelled, man? They're called utilitors. Utility corridors. My god, man. Basically, that's the reason you don't see characters out of place or janitors wandering through the park. They pop in and out of hidden doors and travel a concealed town you're walking on. Janitor told me something that might be common knowledge, but nonetheless news to me. Walt Disney had several apartments built into his parks. There's one above Cinderella's castle, but there's one in the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. They're all over the place. More than that, though, there are nightclubs, a movie theater, a bowling alley, and much more. All behind closed doors built right into the whimsical facades you pass by without a second look. Club 22 is one such hidden area. If you have the cash to join the exclusive club, then you'll have access to it and much more. Club 22 is a place where anything goes. Disney & Co. called these places dark zones, spots where the squeaky clean visage of Mickey drugs, and sex. Conversely, the rest of the park is the bright zone with a few gray zone utilities between. I feel like I'm like on a James Conner episode. Oh my god. As far as janitor said, it wasn't always that way. It was more of a slow decline and the gradual relaxation of social norms within that elite group. Yup, this is a Cause Before Symptom podcast now, everybody. The reason he knows all this? You may have already guessed. He's cleaned it. After a lengthy background check and a non-disclosure form, janitor moved up from a park attendant to one of the Dark Zone cleaning crew. Now, before you get some satanic human sacrifice vision in your head, janitor saw nothing of the sorts. Lots of empty alcohol bottles? Yes. Used condoms scattered like deflated New Year's balloons? Oh yeah. He cleaned up his share of blood, piss, and vomit, but it was all down to the unrestricted behavior of patrons as opposed to any sort of cult behavior. At least that's all he sees in retrospect. All that trash, all the profane subject matter, went into a furnace and mingled with the smoke of a quaint cottage's chimney. If you've been to Disney World, you've breathed ultra-condensed sin. Backing up this information was Hammer. Hammer mailed me the old-fashioned way, though I don't know how he got my home address. That's creepy. He sent me photocopies of work papers providing his employment. What? What you mean proving? Okay, proving his employment with the instruction to burn them when I was convinced. Which I gladly did. Hammer worked around the Disney World Park, doing demolition and construction. At one point, he approached a superior regarding some strange construction plans. There was a wide, rectangular area marked off in the blueprints, about the size of a supermarket. The area was left unnamed and only bore the words "do not dig." Not only was his superior in the dark, but he was super purposefully in the dark. He didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to know about it, and ended the conversation with "this space intentionally left blank." Hammer didn't get it. The area seemed a waste of space, and it was directly conflicting with the work his team had been given. He started poking around the area on his off time, finding only a direct street door and a great span of concrete just beyond. It was a supermarket's worth of blank gray floor. Soon after, Hammer started picking gaskets out of the crowds, and unlike all other reports, the people, the things, would stand in full view of the guy. They'd cluster together in the distance, or they'd just be pressed against a wall when he turned a corner. He said they moved weird, like they were weak or injured, like a deer that's been run down by a hunter and can't flee anymore. The gas masks, the Disney character faces with filters jammed in. He noted that they seemed wet on the inside. Oh! Like condensation on a car window. Tiny beads of water glimmered behind the glass, making it impossible for any of them to actually see. Probing further, Hammer started asking questions of anyone and everyone who had been working in the park for a decade or more. He hit dead ends throughout until he was directed to Ida, an elderly woman who worked in a restaurant on Main Street. She'd been there since way back, and though nobody had the balls to ask directly, everyone knew she had plenty of terrible stories to tell. Hammer asked about the empty space, then about the gask, the gas-masked customers, and at first, he thought he would receive the same non-answers he'd gotten so far. She was quiet. Eerily quiet. Room 0, she croaked, a single shaking hand placed to her cheek as if she were a little girl fearing a father's punishment. She didn't meet the man's gaze for an entire conversation. Room 0, as it turned out, was yet another hidden room just like the apartments and Club 22. However, its sheer size and its spot deep beneath the park set it apart from any of the fun dark zones. It was a bomb shelter. Room 0 was built to withstand a massive attack, be it conducted by foreign or domestic enemies. Room 0 was to be stocked with enough rations to feed the entire park's average number of patrons at any given moment, and housed a smaller yet lavish panic room of sorts for Disney's higher-ups. During World Even World War is misspelled. Anyways, during World War II, official Disney gas masks were eventually produced for children to wear in the event of an attack. The idea was that it would be less scary for kids if Mickey's face was emblazoned on wartime safety devices. Yes, I know the obvious problems with that. During the Cold War scare of the 60s, when Disney World was constructed, Room Zero was stroked. Room Zero was stroked with similar masks as well. Whether they cared about the fears of children or just callous branding, those things found their way down there. What's more, some genius decided that kids would then be frightened by the gas masks their parents wore. And so all masks, adult and child, were made to comply with this insane standard. Ida described it as treating a wound with lemon juice. None of this explained what Hammer had been seeing, though. Not only the seemingly supernatural appearances, but the emptied-out room as well. I've been in there, he explained. There's nothing but a cement floor and four walls. No, Ida shook her head and covered her mouth, feeling a snob. A snob. You've been on top of it. Someone or something sounded the alarm one day when the park was at full capacity. The warning was clear. It was supposedly an air attack. Security ushered everyone down into the tremendous shelter. There, they were ordered to put on the masks and hunker down for the duration of the assault. Everything was quiet for about 30 minutes, save for the crying children and the frightened whispers. No one wanted to die, and so they were thankful in a way for the strange measure of safety. Then, the first scream rang out. Hey, a man shouted. Quit pinching. Waves of shrieks and yelps rippled through the crowd from one wall to the other, back and forth. Who's running around? Settle down! Someone hollered. Who's laughing? This isn't funny. Ow! What's up on my foot? Despite security guards urging to calm down and keep their cool, the crowd became more and more agitated until, finally, after nearly an hour of madness, the lights flickered, then died. What followed could only be described as utter chaos. In the dark, only the walls of the walls of the young, the wails of the young, and the anguished cries of adults could be heard in the massive swelling din that bloodied the ears of all within that black echo chamber. A group of staff members and a select few patrons made it out of the door, ready to face the war above rather than the insanity below. What they found, of course, was a desolate yet untouched theme park. The music continued to play, echoing through silent storybook towns. Upon returning to Room Zero, the few who stood at the top of the steel staircase that led down into the pitch blackness heard no sign of the previous fray. There was only silence. Ida herself descended that staircase despite the begging of those she left above. He reached the reinforced doors, herself now awash in darkness, and hearing only the buzzing in her ears. A single voice came out of the darkness. The echo made it impossible to tell whether the mocking, raspy voice was at the back of the bomb shelter or if it was right in her face. Shut the door, dear. You're letting out the cold. Gripped by terror, she did just that. And within days, the entire thing, shelter, staircase, all of it, was covered with feet upon feet of cement. Air systems and generators above its ceiling were removed, creating a large empty space. They're all still down there, Ida told Hammer, down there with whoever that was. Might have noticed I've used Ida's name. Unfortunately, she passed away soon after telling her story. Accidental fall, supposedly after getting out of bed to turn on the light. Such accompanied the devotee, the paper reported, that her entire bedroom was covered with Mickey silhouettes. That's it? Okay, we're gonna have to read the prequel. I want more. Also, be right back. Let me go get a drink. Alright, I'm back. We got abandoned by Disney, again by Slime Beast. And it's a very weird mushroom picture of Mickey. Alright, let's get with it. I stuttered or messed up the wording, but that's besides the point. Anyways, some of you may have heard the Disney Corporation is responsible for at least one real live ghost town. Disney built the Treasure Island Resort in Baker's Bay in the Bahamas. It didn't start as a ghost town, however. Disney's cruise ships would have actually stopped at the resort and leave tourists there to relax. We relax in luxury. This is a fact. Look it up. Disney blew $30 million on the place. Yes, $30 million. And then they abandoned it. Disney blamed the shallow waters, too shallow for their ships to safely operate, and there was even blame cast on the workers, saying that since they were from the Bahamas, they were too lazy to work a regular schedule. That's where the factual nature of their story ends. It wasn't because of sand, and it obviously wasn't because foreigners are lazy. Both are convenient excuses. No, I sincerely doubt those reasons were legitimate. Why don't I buy the official story? Because of Mowgli's Palace. Near the beachside city of Emerald Isle, North Carolina, Disney began construction of Mowgli's Palace in the late 1990s. The concept was a jungle-themed resort with a large, you guessed it, palace in the center of the whole thing. If you're unfamiliar with the character of Mowgli, then you might better remember the story, The Jungle Book. If you haven't seen it anywhere else, you know it as the Disney cartoon from decades past. Mowgli is an abandoned child, in the jungle essentially raised by animals and simultaneously threatened/pursued by other animals. Mowgli's Palace was a controversial undertaking from the start. Disney bought up a ton of high-priced land for the project, and there was actually a scandal surrounding some of the purchases. The local government claimed eminent domain on people's homes, then turned around and sold the properties to Disney. At one point, a home that had been constructed was immediately condemned with little to no explanation. The land grabbed by the government was supposedly for some fictional highway project, knowing full well what was going on. People started calling it Mickey Mouse Highway. Then, there was concept art. A group of stuffed shirts from Disney Co. actually held a city meeting. They intended to sell everyone on how lucrative this project was going to be for everyone. When they showed the concept art, this gigantic Indian palace surrounded by jungle, staffed with men and women in loincloths and tribal gear, well, suffice to say everyone flipped their shit. We're talking about a large Indian palace, jungle, and loincloths not only in the center of a relatively wealthy area, but also a somewhat xenophobic area of southern USA. It was a questionable mix at that point in history. One member of the crowd tried to storm the stage, but he was quickly subdued by security after he managed to break one of the presentation boards over his knee. Disney took that community and essentially broke over its knee as well. The houses were razed, the land was cleared, and there wasn't a thing anyone could do or say about it. Local TV and newspapers were against the resort at the beginning, but some insane connection between Disney meeting holdings and the local venues came into play, and their opinions turned on a dime. So anyway, Treasure Island, the Bahamas, Disney sunk those millions in and then split. The same thing happened with Mowgli's Palace. Construction was complete, visitors actually served the resort, surrounding communities were flooded with traffic and the usual annoyances associated with an influx of lost and irate tourists. And then, it all just stopped. Disney shut it down and nobody knew what to think. But they were pretty happy about it. Disney's loss was pretty hilarious and wonderful to a large group of folks who didn't want this in the first place. I honestly didn't give the place another thought since hearing it closed over a decade ago. I lived maybe 4 hours from Emerald Isle, so really I only heard the rumblings and didn't experience any of it firsthand. And then, I read this article from someone who had explored Treasure Island Resort and posted a whole blog about all the crazy stuff he found there. Stuff just left behind. Things smashed, defaced, probably ruined by the disgruntled former employees who had lost their jobs. The locals from all around probably had a hand in wrecking that place. People there felt just as angry about Treasure Island as folks here did about Mowgli's Palace. Plus, there were rumors that Disney had released the aquarium stock into local waters when it closed, including sharks. Could want to take a few swings at some merchandise after that. Well, what I'm getting at is that this blog about Treasure Island got me thinking. Even though many years had passed since its closing, I figured it might be cool to do some urban exploration at Mowgli's Palace. Take some photos, write about my experience, probably see if there was anything I could take home as a memento. I'm not gonna say I wasted no time in getting there because honestly it took me another year after I first found that Treasure Island article to get around to going up to Emerald Isle. Over the course of that year, I did a lot of research on the Palace Resort, or rather, I tried to. Naturally, no official Disney site or resource made any mention of the palace that had been scrubbed clean. Even odder, however, was that nobody before myself had apparently thought to blog about the palace or even post a photo. None of the local TV or newspaper sites had one word about the place, though that was to be expected since they had all swung Disney's way. They wouldn't be out there lauding their embarrassment, you know. Recently, I learned that corporations can actually ask Google, for example, to remove links from search results. Basically for no good reason. Looking back, it's probably not that nobody spoke at a resort, but rather their words were made inaccessible. Okay, there's a problem with the loading here. Anyways, okay, there we go. So in the end, I could barely find the place. All I had to go was an old as hell map I had received in the mail back in the 1990s. It was a promotional item sent out to people who had recently been to Disney World, and I guess since I had been there in the late 80s, that was quote-unquote recent. I didn't really intend to hang on to it. It just got shoved in with my books and comics from my childhood, and I'd only remembered it months into my research. And even then, it took me another few weeks to locate the storage bin my parents had shoved it all into. But I eventually did find it. Locals were no help, though, as most were transplants who had moved to the beach in recent years, or old residents who had just sneered at me and made rude gestures the second I managed to say, "Where would I find Mowgli's cut?" The drive took me through an inordinately long corridor of overgrowth. Tropical plants that had run rampant and overpopulated the area mixed with the native species of flora that actually belonged there and had tried to reclaim the land. I was in awe when I reached the front gates of the resort. Tremendous, monolithic wooden gates whose support to either side looked like they must have been cut from giant sequoias. The gate itself had been gouged in several places by woodpeckers and eaten away at the base by burrowing insects. Hanging on the gate was a sheet of metal, some random scrap with hand-painted letters scrawled in the back, "Abandoned by Disney." Clearly the handiwork of some past local or an employee who wanted to make some small protest. The gates were open enough to walk through but not drive, so grabbing my digital camera and the map, whose flip side showed a layout of the resort, I set off on foot. The inner grounds of the place were just as overgrown as the entryway. Palm trees stood untended and ragged among piles of their own coconuts. Banana plants similarly stood in their own stinking bug-rolled refuse. There was this sort of clash between order and chaos, as carefully planted rows of perennial flowers mixed with obnoxious tall weeds and stinking blackened mushrooms. All that remained of any outdoor structures were broken, rotting wood and various charred bits of unidentifiable material. What was most likely an information booth for an outside... Would it be outdoor? Forget. Outdoor bar was now simply a pile of assorted debris, chopped up by past vandalism and ravaged by weather. The most interesting thing on the grounds was a statue of Baloo, the friendly bear, from the Jungle Book, which stood in a sort of courtyard in front of the main building. Kind of weird. He was frozen in a jovial wave toward no one, staring into empty space with a silly toothy grin as bird shit covered whole swaths of his fur and vines ensnared his platform. I approached the main building, the palace, only to find the outside of the building covered in graffiti where the original paint had been peeled and chipped away. The front doors weren't just open, they had been taken off their hinges and were stolen. Above the front doors, or the gaping maw where they had been, someone had once again painted "Abandoned by Disney." I wish I could tell you about all the awesome stuff I saw inside the palace. Forgotten statues, abandoned cash registers, a full-fledged secret society of homeless bums, but no! The inside of the building was so stark, so bare, that I actually think people had stolen the molding off the walls. Anything that was too big to steal, counters, desks, giant fake trees, they were all resting amid this empty echo chamber that amplified my every step like a slow rat-a-tat of a machine gun. I checked the floor plan and headed to all the locations that it may seem. Anyway, excuse me, interesting. The kitchen was, as you'd imagine, an industrial food prep area with all the appliances in space. No expenses spared. Every glass surface was broken, every door knocked off its hinges, every metal surface kicked and dented. The entire place smelled like very old pee. The huge freezer, not even remotely cool now, at row upon row of empty shelf space. Hooks hung from the ceiling, probably from hanging cuts of meat, and as I stood inside for a moment, I noticed they were swinging. Each hook swung in a random direction, but their movements were so slow and small, not small, small, that it was almost impossible to see. I figured it had been caused by my footsteps, so I stopped one from swinging by, clutching into my fist, then carefully letting, spelled with only one C, go, but within seconds, it started to swing once more. No period. The bathrooms were in much the same state as the rest of the place. Just like the Treasure Island Resort, someone had methodically smashed each porcelain commode with coconuts and other implements. That was about a half-inch of rancid, stinking, stagnant water on the floor, so it didn't sit there very long. What's odd is that the toilets and the sinks and the bidets in the ladies' room, yes, I went there, all dripped, leaked, or just ran freely. It seemed to me that they should have shut the water off long, long ago. There are plenty of rooms in the resort, but naturally I didn't have the time to look for all of them. They were similarly wrecked, and I didn't expect to find anything there. I thought there was actually television or radio in one room, as I really think I heard a quiet conversation coming out. Though, it was like a whisper, probably my own breathing echoing in the silence, or just another case of the sound of flowing water playing tricks on my mind. That is what it sounded like. I didn't believe it. Short, unknown reply. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Your father told you. Unknown reply, or possibly just weeping. I know, that sounds ridiculous. I'm just telling you what I experienced. Well, I thought there might have been something worse in that room, or worse. Some vagrants who had hold up there and probably would have knifed me. I will be right back. Or I'm back. At the front doors of the palace again. I figured I hadn't found anything of note and had wasted the trip up. As I looked out the door, I noticed something interesting in the courtyard that I had apparently missed. Something that would give me at least one thing to show for all my trouble, even if it was just a photograph. There was a lifelike statue of a python, maybe 80 feet long, coiled up and sunning itself on a pedestal right in the center of the area. It was almost time for the sun to start setting, so the light fell into the object in the perfect way for a photograph. I approached the python and snapped the photo. Then I stood on my toes and snapped another. I moved closer again to get the detail of its face. Slowly, casually, the python lifted its head, looked directly into my eyes, turned and slithered off the pedestal, across the grass and into the trees. All 80 feet of it. It heard its head long disappeared into the woods before its tail even left the sunning spot. Disney had released all their exotic animals onto the ground. Right there on my floor plan map was the reptile house. I should have known. I read about the sharks at Treasure Isle, and I should have known they'd done this. I was dumbfounded. Just utterly stupefied. My mouth must have been hanging open for the longest time before I came back down to earth and snapped it shut. I blinked a few times and backed away from where the snake had been, back toward the palace. Even though it was totally gone, I still wasn't taking any chances and backed my way into the building. Took a few deep breaths and slaps on my own face to get myself round the head after all that. I looked for a place to sit down as my legs were feeling a bit like jelly at this point. Of course there was no place to sit down unless I wanted to recline into the broken glass and dead leaf carpet or haul myself up onto a desk of questionable reliability. I had seen some stairs near the palace's lobby and decided to go have a seat there until I felt better. The staircase is far enough away from the front of the building to be relatively clean, save for a startling accumulation of dust. Pulled a wedge of metal off the wall, once again painted it with the Abandoned by Disney motto, I had become accustomed to. I placed a wedge on the stairs and sat on it to keep it at least somewhat clean. Stairway led downward below ground level, and using my camera flash as a sort of improvised flashlight, I could see that the staircase ended in the metal mesh door with a padlock. A sign on the door. A real sign! Read mascots only. Thank you! This perked up my spirits a little bit for two reasons. One, a mascots only area would have definitely had some interesting stuff back in the day. Two, the padlock was still in place. Nobody had gone down there. Not the vandals, not the looters, nobody. This is the one place I could actually explore and perhaps find something interesting to photograph for one simply steal. I had come to the palace essentially agreeing with myself that it was okay to take anything I wanted because, hey, abandoned. It didn't take much to bust the lock. Well, actually, that's wrong. It didn't take much to bust the metal plate on the wall that the padlock was hooked to. Time and decay had done most of the work for me. I was able to bend the metal plate enough to pull the screws on the wall. Something nobody else had apparently thought of or had been able to do at the time. The mascot's only area was the startling and very welcome change from the rest of the building I'd seen. For one, every second of third fluorescent light overhead was illuminated, even though they flickered and faded randomly. Also, nothing had been stolen or broken, even if age and exposure were definitely taking their toll. Tables had notepads and pens, there were clocks, even a punch-in clock on the wall completed with filled out time cards. Chairs were scattered around, and there was even a small break room with an old, static-filled television and long rotted-out food and drink on the counters. It was like one of those post-apocalyptic movies where everything is left in a state of evacuation. As I walked the maze-like sub-basement hallways of the mascot's only area, the sights just became more and more interesting. As I went further, desks and tables were knocked over, paper scattered and almost melded with the damp floor, and a large carpet of mold was slowly overtaking a real rotting crimson floor covering. Everything was just sort of squishy. Anything wood disintegrated into mush when I applied even the least amount of force, and clothing items hanging on hooks in one of the rooms simply filled with moist threads if I tried to unhook them. One thing that annoyed me was that the light was becoming more sparse and unreliable as I went further into the dank Shrek memes? Into the dank, suffocating depths of the place. Eventually I reached a black and yellow striped door with the words Character Prep 1 stenciled on it. Give me a brief moment. I have been sitting in the most uncomfortable position for a while now, so that's a good adjustment. Okay, back to the story. Eventually I reached a black and yellow... No, I already read that. My mistake. The door wouldn't open at first. I figured this was probably where the costumes were kept, and I definitely wanted a photograph of that twisted, stinking mess. Try as I might, whatever angle or trick I tried, the door wouldn't budge. Man, I've been burping like crazy. That is, until I gave up and started to walk away. That was when there was a slight popping sound and the door creaked open slowly. Inside, the room was completely dark. Pitch black. I used a camera flash to look for a light switch in the wall by the door, which is spelled as B-Y, as in purchasing something. So, alright. But there was nothing. As I made my search, I was jarred out of my sense of excitement by a loud electrical buzz. Rows of lights overhead suddenly flashed to life, flickering and fading in and out like the rest I'd passed. It took a second for my eyes to adjust, and it seemed like the light was going to just keep getting brighter until all the bulbs exploded. But just when I thought it would reach the critical stage, the lights dimmed a bit and steadied. The room was exactly as I had pictured it. Various Disney costumes hung on the walls, fully put together like strange cartoon cadaveres hung from invisible nooses. There was an entire rack of loincloths and native clothes on hangers toward the back. What I found odd, however, and what I wanted to photograph right away, was a Mickey Mouse costume at the center of the room. Unlike the other costumes, it was lying on its back in the center of a floor like a murder victim. The fur on the costume was rotten and shedding, creating bare patches. What was even odder, however, was the... It just sounds weird reading this out loud, the howevers. However, was the coloring of the costume. It was like a photo negative of the actual Mickey Mouse. Black where he should have been white, and white where she should be black. Wow, you're really writing this like it's a yin and yang thing, huh? His normally red overalls were light blue. The sight was off-putting enough that I actually put off the photographing the thing until the last. I don't even know what that even means by sentence structure, but okay. I took a picture of the costumes hanging on the walls. Upward angles, downward angles, side shots to show an entire row of frozen putrid cartoon faces. Some with plastic eyes missing. Then I decided to stage a shot. Just one of the red-raggled characters' heads on the slick, grimy floor. I think I mean grimy, but anyways, I reached for a headpiece of a Donald Duck costume and carefully removed it so the thing wouldn't fall apart in my hands. As I looked into the face of the wide-eyed, moldering head, a loud clattering sound made me jump with fright. I looked down at my feet, and there, between my shoes, was a human skull. It had fallen out of the mascot head and shattered into pieces at me feet. Only the empty face and lower jaw remained, staring up at me. I dropped the duck head immediately, as you'd expect, and moved from the door. As I stood in the doorway, I looked back to the skull on the floor. I had taken a picture of it, you know? I had to, for any number of reasons that may seem silly, but only if you don't think it through. I needed proof of what happened, especially if Disney was going to somehow make this go away. I had no doubt in my mind, right from the start, that even if it was just gross negligence, Disney was responsible for this. A period and then the letter N. And then that's when Mickey, that photo negative opposite Mickey in the middle of the floor started to get up. First sitting up, then climbing to its feet. The Mickey Mouse costume or whoever was inside of it stood there at the center of the room. Its fake face just starting directly at me as I mumbled. So it's starting. How's that work exactly? So it's just starting directly at me as I mumbled no over and over and over. With shaking hands, a violently thrashing heart, and legs that had once again turned to jelly, I managed to lift the camera and aimed it at the opposite creature. Now quietly sizing me up. The digital camera screen displayed only dead pixels in the shape of the thing. It was a perfect silhouette of the Mickey Mouse costume. As the camera moved in my unsteady hands, the dead pixels spread, marring the screen wherever Mickey's outline moved to. Then the camera died, went blank and quiet and broken. I raised my eyes once again to the Mickey Mouse costume. Hey, it said in a hushed, perverted, but perfectly executed Mickey Mouse voice. Want to see my head come off? Wait. Hey, want to see my head come off? That was a horrible Mickey Mouse voice impression to get Quinn for this. It started to pull at its own head, working its clumsy, glove-clad fingers around its neck with clawing, impatient movements similar to a wounded man trying to pull himself free of a predator's jaws. As it worked its digits into its neck, so much blood, so much thick, chunky yellow blood. I turned away as I heard a sickening tearing of cloth and flesh, only cared about getting away. Above the doorway out of this room, I saw the final message clawed into the metal with bone or fingernails. Abandoned by God. I never got the pictures out of the camera. I never wrote the blog entry about it. After I ran from the place, fled for my sanity, if not my very life. I knew why Disney didn't want anyone to know about this place. They didn't want anyone like me getting in. They didn't want anything like that getting out. Wow. Just wow. That is a crazy story. Now we're going to do Return to Oz. But again, I will be right back. Alright, I'm returning today. Or, I don't know, I said that. Anyways, right now, we got Return to Oz. So goodbye, Yellow Brick Road, where the dogs of society howl. You can't plant me into your penthouse. Why does that remind me of a reference? The word penthouse, I don't know, I'll think of it later. Probably not today, though. I'm going back to my plow. Back to the howling old owl in the woods. Hunting the horny back toad. What the? Okay, that went weird. The horny back toad. Oh, I finally decided my future lies. Am I thinking of this in like a way where it's like, oh yeah, guys, did you know that bully actually meant being a nice person to someone back then in the days? Oh my god, is this what horny is in this particular sentence or poem, whatever? I don't know. Oh, I finally saw my future lies beyond the Yellow Brick Road. Elton John. Goodbye, Yellow Brick Road. That's an Elton John song? Is this like an obvious thing that I'm just barely learning or something? Writing about horny toads? I thought it was horny for sausages, but okay. In 1985, the Disney film Return to Oz was released in cinemas, and a few years later made its way onto home VHS. I can't remember how old I was at the time I seen it. Period. Perhaps 5 years old at most. Period. Lowercase I knew right away that there was something unusual about this film. Something especially disturbing. I remember that the first time I seen it, I cried. I remember watching the film, glued in place in front of the television. Not out of involvement, but out of terror. Truth be told, it is a bloody, scary film. Now, before you groan and go to read something else, don't worry, this isn't a story of a haunted videotape. The film itself played out perfectly normal, as much as possible, yada yada yada, blah 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 blah. Dorothy didn't turn the camera and start screaming white blood poured from his eyes. His eyes? Dorothy's a tranny now? Dang. From his eyes or anything stupid like that. I'm not interested in telling you the stupid stories like... I just want to tell you how I felt when I watched this video. Some of the strange things that it reminded me about. It's a strange story, and I really wonder quite what the producer, Paul Maslansky, was thinking at the time. I don't know. The power behind this film didn't really rest with him. Instead, it rested with the film's director, Walter Murch, a specialist in sound and editing. Murch worked on editing for films like The Godfather and Apocalypse Now, but Return to Oz was his only venture into directing. I keep thinking that something may have happened to him during the production of this film. Maybe something that put him off directing any films from then onwards. Hey, that's just a guess though. My mother got a copy of the film on VHS. I remember distinctly because she also had a copy of the old Judy Garland musical version. She loved that film. I was somewhat less impressed with it. Sepia opening for a child who was used to color television seemed boring to me. Didn't care for dancing, and the witch didn't impress me. All the sets looked just too false. Okay, that is a choice of wording, but okay. Anyways, I found myself not appreciating the film. My mother, though, loved it. When I was an adult, she told me about Judy Garland's drug addiction and her gradual fall from Hollywood grace. A story that felt equally tragic to anything on silver screen. Return to Oz, however, wasn't a sequel. In fact, the only thing that connected it to the musical version was the presence of ruby slippers, which were silver in the original book. But my mother was still excited to see it, so she had asked a friend to find her a copy of the film, and we had watched it. The film tells the story of Dorothy's return to the wonderful land of Oz. You just said that the story has something to do with the original Wizard of Oz besides the red shoes, and now you're saying that Dorothy's part of the story. That doesn't even make any sense. Get your crap together, author. Buddy. Okay, the film tells the story of Dorothy's return to the wonderful land of Oz. Or at least, it should be wonderful, but it really isn't. Burn. But she's desperate to go back, and when we first meet her in the film, she is very depressed, miserable, and lonely. Typical. The very first image we have in the film is her staring sadly into a dirty mirror. Before long, her family takes her to a hospital. At this hospital, which it transpires is more of an asylum, Dorothy is introduced to a doctor, Keenan, to try out the newly invented electric healing machine. The doctor introduces Dorothy to it, pointing out the machine's features. Here, he explains, pointing to the voltage meter, is its mouth. And here, he explains, pointing to the switch that will send crackling shocks of electricity searing through the young girl's skull, is his nose. She is escorted down into the bowels of the hospital. Man, I don't want to be in a hospital's crack. God, disgusting perv. Through tall and towering hallways and locked with a barren, empty cell. That night, she is strapped to a hospital bed, and whilst the screams of other inmates echo through the hospital, is secured to the electric machine. A storm rages outside, and soon it knocks out the hospital's power, during which Dorothy is rescued by another young girl. Together, they flee into the river at the banks of the hospital, where they drown! I mean, Dorothy returns to the land of Oz. She journeys. There's no period. It just capitalizes she, like as if there was a period. She journeys there in the ruins of an old crate, floating down the river. That's the way the story goes, but that's not all that happens. In the old Wizard of Oz film, the one with Judy Garland, Dorothy's house is plucked out of the farm by a tornado. We all know that tornadoes don't move people from one location and drop them gently and carefully down in another. If she had been a real person caught in the small, wooded farmhouse in the winds of a tornado, Dorothy would have died. It's fiction, vato. And maybe she did. All the rest of the film was simply a hallucination within her fevered and frantic brain. No, that's just a theory. In this film, in Return of Oz, Dorothy falls into the churning waters of the river, struggling to stay above its surface, her arms splashing, her mouth gasping for air. And then, she's in Oz. For a few moments, everything seems fine. Everything seems quite happy, and she finds a talking chicken called Bellina, who offers to travel with her on the way to Emerald City. And along the way, she finds a tree which distributes lunchboxes filled with ready-made sandwiches. It's almost like everything may turn out right once they get to the Emerald City, because then she'll be able to get back to her farm. Her farm. I like how the sentence is just right after her farm in that paragraph where it says, because then she'll be able to get back to her farm. It's just another sentence in the next paragraph that just says, her farm. Her farm, everybody. Her farm, where she sat staring into the dirty mirror, her eyes heavy with despair. David Kerr of the Chicago Reader described this film as bleak, creepy, and occasionally terrifying. You don't want Dorothy to go home, not to the world full of doctors who want to rip the happiness from her, from the nurses who tie her down, from the towering hallways and electric machines with wide grinning mouths. Dorothy's old farmhouse in Oz. This looks super fake. And this is a second chapter or subcategory called Down the River. Soon, Dorothy finds her old farmhouse, the one which she crashed in her previous visit to Oz. It sits in an overgrown forest. Hey, an ad. Get out of here. No cheery dancing munchkins to be found here, only wild vines and twisted trees. Dorothy wipes the dust that has etched its way over the windows, trying to see the inside. Then she finds the old brick road, only to realize that it has been uprooted, its bricks broken and shattered. The land she wanted to get back to is twisted, nightmarish, and hostile. The old farmhouse I grew up in a small village in the rural areas. What in the world's an area? Of Cornwall. We had farms around the landscape, and I could climb up one of the small, gently sloping hills and look out into the horizon and see only fields of wheat for as far as it went. That was my Kansas. I thought it was late summer when I found the old farmhouse. I'd gone out to explore, despite my father's instruction to stay in our house's garden. I had hiked my way over the old crumbling stone wall that bordered our garden, and made my way into the fields, venturing as far as I could before the sun would set. I avoided the fields to cows, great towering things, and the clouds above gradually began to grow dark and pendulous. I'd gone further than I had before. Keenan to examine a small copse of trees in a distance that I'd never been to before. It was there, down near the foot of the hill, that I'd seen the old farmhouse for the first time. I'd hurried down to the house and ran up to the windows. They were etched with dirt. I could barely see anything through them. I stood up on my tiptoes, trying to look into them, and could only make out a brownish haze. I scrubbed the windows, and soon I was able to make out the inside of the house. It was in a disarray, chairs tipped over, and a table lying broken in the corner. I could make out a doorway leading into another room, but whatever lay through there was out of sight. It was in the same house. The layout was different. The rooms inside of it were different. But in and of itself, the house was almost a perfect fit. It was like my own version of Dorothy's ruined farmhouse, transported here not far from my home. I wanted to get inside. I don't know why. Perhaps simply because it was there, or perhaps because I wanted to get further than Dorothy ever did in the film. I pried the window open, and under the house, the witch lies dead. Crawled inside. It felt warm, as if the air itself was hot. There was a soft hum in the air, which I soon realized was coming from a few buzzing insects. Felt stuffy, as if the summer heat was magnified and made heavy. There were no lights, or if there were, the lights would not come on. The room was dyed a soft reddish brown from the dust on the windows. I crept across the house, stands atop the dead, which as she rots to beneath. It's worded so weird. That's why my pronunciation of the whole entire sentence just sounded so off. I don't know how to describe it. Anyways, wooden floorboards, and surely enough, they creaked beneath me. I looked into the doorway to the upper room and found it led to a kitchen. Several items lay in the sink, cutlery, and sharp edges. I started to feel sick. I didn't want to be here. The air tasted wrong. There was a smell, something I'd never smelled before, but I knew it was bad. I turned to leave and wanted to run, but I heard a heavy sound at the doorway and knew it was a footstep. The figure stood in the doorway, a man. The house. There's no period after man, and then the next paragraph just has one sentence, and it's the house, and the is just not capitalized. The house is marked with death. It sours it from below the witch, which was below her left below body broken. My God. Stood blocking out the sunlight. He wore a thick, heavy brown coat, the kind most farmers in the area would wear, but his beard was thick and mottled like wire wool. His hair hung in dense clumps as he started at me with his eyes, sharp and brutal eyes, with utterly intense hatred. He towered above me, a small child of about 6 years. This giant of a figure was holding something in his right hand. I couldn't see what, only that it was sharp and pointed and stained with mud. It had to be mud, right? The man opened his mouth and roared at me, his teeth crooked behind his mane-like beard, releasing every echo of the old broken house with his words. Get out. And I ran. I turned and ran out of the house, charging through the kitchen and pulling myself through the window and out onto the field. I didn't slow down for a single second. I tripped and fell into the mud at the base of the window, but I didn't stop. I kept running. I didn't look back. I ran over the field and through the trees. I was gasping for air and my legs hurt, but I didn't stop running until I got home. I didn't notice it. It was dark. It was a dark. That the sun had set and the dark of night had covered the village. I slammed the door shut, blocking out the man in the broken farmhouse forever. My father came downstairs when she heard me slam the door and demanded to know where I had been and what I had been doing. I don't want to explain. I didn't want to tell him, and so I lied. He demanded to know more ardently, telling me that it was late and that he knew I was lying. When I eventually did tell him, he marched me up to my bedroom and ordered me to lower my pants and lay over my bed, where he removed his belt and thrashed my butt until I was screaming and crying rampantly. He even made my ass bleed. He made me promise, on threat of the same punishment being delivered again, that I would not sneak into people's houses again. I was still sore for most of the next day, and I had no idea until years later as to why he had grown so angry with me. When I did find out, it was in my teenage years. Our family had moved away from the village into a small house in a large city. The change had been considerable, not just in terms of the building, but of the new lifestyle. It became impossible to avoid hearing about the world around us, and I no longer had my parents' continual presence to shelter me from the information they could find on the newspapers or the internet. It was on the evening news I had seen the photograph of the man in the old farmhouse. The reporter explained that he had died in prison, serving his life sentence for the murder of 4 young children, all aged between 4 and 9 years old. Had been arrested a month after my dad had taken his belt. Wow. Been arrested a month after my dad had taken his belt to me. Made me promise not to venture to the strangers' houses again. In prison, he had committed suicide. The news didn't say how. I later learned that he had broken off a sharp edge of his toothbrush and swallowed it, slicing open his throat. He choked to death on his own blood. Dorothy continued her journey down the broken ruins of the Yellow Brick Road, and so did I. The Gale. When Dorothy arrived at the Emerald City, she finds all of her friends, but they had been turned to stone. They stand around the ruins of the Emerald City, their bodies lifeless. The city is abandoned, with only their bodies left gray and stoic. The Emerald City is a mausoleum, but it's not unoccupied. One of the most terrifying moments of the film, we meet the living occupants of the city. It tumbles into view, moving on 4 legs, each leg ending in a screeching, rusty wheel. At first, we see its face as a black twisted mass of tissue and muscle, corrupted into a maniacal grimace, eyes peering out with a cold biting glare. Then it lifts its head open, revealing that the previous was simply a false previous one, its true face hiding beneath. With no period, no space, and it just keeps going on, it laughs. Come here, it rasps in a guttural scream. I laugh and laugh. More of them appear. 34, a whole gang. Dorothy flees, and I would clutch my hands to the eyes, hoping to block them out and just make the nightmarish creatures go away. Creature? Wilfred, civilization. Dorothy finds, locked in an old chamber in the Emerald City, a mechanical guardian called Tick-Tock. Who offers to protect her from the wheeled monsters. This creature has its own mechanical face, much like the one on the electric shock machine back in the hospital in Kansas. But it is Dorothy's friend, and it fights off the wheelers and discovers that the city had been taken over by an evil witch named Mombi. Tick-Tock isn't terrifying. I beg to differ. He's a friendly, amicable character. The same cannot be said for all of Dorothy's other friends, but we'll get to that. First, we need to talk about Mombi. I didn't recognize her as a child when I first watched the film, but Mombi was played by Jean Marsh, who also played the nurse that trapped Dorothy into her hospital bed at the start of the film, who chased Dorothy into the river to meet her fate. She was for 5 years married to John Pertwee, the actor who famously portrayed the third incarnation of Doctor Who. And perhaps more relevant to the story, played the character of Wurzel Gummidge, a scarecrow who was brought to life. I mentioned the scarecrow because Dorothy's other companion is a prisoner of Mombi's. When Mombi traps Dorothy into her tower, the young girl from Kansas meets one of Mombi's failed experiments, Jack Pumpkinhead. Jack is a terrifying creature taller than any adult actor in this film, with stick-thin limbs which seem to go on forever. It stands unsteadily on elongated legs, wearing a tattered, old, discolored coat. Its fingers ending in long-reaching branches. Excuse me again. Atop its neck sits a pumpkin in the place of a head. When the creature moves, it does so in sharp and sudden jerks, pulling its hands along as if they were alien parts of its body. Its voice is sickly sweet, provided by Brian Henson. Brian Henson is the son of the famous Jim Henson, and is now chairman of the Jim Henson Company. His voice is certainly the softest part of an otherwise terrifying creature. If you've ever seen The Nightmare Before Christmas, you may find some interesting character similarities with the film's lead character. At several points throughout the film, Jack's limbs will break and fall apart, having to be bound back in place with rope. Dorothy's only way to escape from Mombi's tower is to steal the powder of life, which the witch used to bring... it sounded weird out loud. Used to bring the pumpkin-headed creature to life. Civilization. She stores the powder in a glass cabinet along with her spare heads. Yes, Mombi has a collection of heads. Does she give good head? She changes them to fit her mood. They sit in the cabinets looking for all purpose to be asleep, but each head is very much alive. That night, when Dorothy attempts to steal the powder of life from the cabinet, she accidentally awakens one of the disembodied heads. Its eyes snap awake, and in a raspy voice it screams the girl's name, Dorothy Gale. The other heads awake and sort of scream. They scream and screamed and screamed and screamed and screamed. Their echoing screams woke the witch herself, who rose from her bed, nightgown flowing like a spectre, and the space on her shoulders where her head should be utterly vacant A headless figure stumbling towards a young girl. Arms outstretched, all the while her head screamed in terrible unison. We'd been in the city for a year. I'd been enrolled in a new school. It was far larger than I was accustomed to, and some of the boys at the start of the year had been brutally mocking. I was labeled as a farm boy and treated as an outsider. Over the course of the difference, and soon I was simply one of the other school kids. I'd seen him in the schoolyard. I didn't know his name, and it was a bright kid with a splash of sunlight blonde hair. I think he must have been about 11 years old, but to my young eyes, he could have been older by an infinite number of years. He was a big kid. As a big kid, I tried to avoid him because he and his friends were loud and boisterous. He was in the upper years of school, and as a result, he didn't have to wear his uniform. None of the upper years did, and so the big kid would wear whatever he wanted, usually a white t-shirt and jeans. I don't think he'd ever spoken to me. I barely even noticed him, but because of what happened, I remembered him. It was summer. I was off school. During the start of summer holidays. Couldn't have been more than a week since school stopped. And I pronounce it like that because, again, the spelling is just so atrocious. Still a few more weeks before we were due to head away to the seaside to spend our holiday in the sun. It was already a nice enough day. The sun was warm and there was a cool wind. Dorothy Gale in the air. I don't even know what that sentence even means anyways. My mother had taken me into the city center earlier that day, and she wanted to pick up a few items from the large post office where packages were sorted. What does that have to do with, like, it just randomly just says Dorothy Gale in the air? What is this storytelling, man? I was feeling rather sour as my mother's venture out to do the daily shopping had interrupted my time for watching morning cartoons. Nevertheless, I had trudged along on the promise that if I behaved, we could rent out a film from the video rental store that evening. It had been a long time since we had rented out Return to Oz, and that film had faded from my memory. I was excited, and I was keen to see what we could find in the dark little video rental store. My mother was already certain that she wanted to rent out the Judy Garland musical version of Wizard of Oz, and relive her love of the classic. And this was years before Blockbusters came here to England, and video... What?! And video rental stores were still small, little stores owned by enterprising individuals looking to break into a new market. My mother packed her car just a few yards from the store and we got out. The wind at Dorothy Gale was starting to pick up and it was starting to feel a little cold. I grabbed my coat from the back seat of the car and pulled it off. My mother looked over to me and said, "I'm going to pop into the bakery for a moment." The bakery, I should mention, was on the street corner, 2 stores from the video rental shop, a small barber shop between the two. "Wait here," she indicated to the front of the video store. I waited. I wasn't going to argue, and I certainly wasn't going to disobey. The promise of watching a new film that evening was enough to ensure that. I waited for what felt like an age, but I'm sure that was no more than a minute. When I heard the shouts from the other side of the street, I looked over. It was the big kid, in his white t-shirt and jeans, his bright blonde hair shining especially bright in the summer sun. He was on a bicycle along with 3 other kids. I recognized all of them from school, but just like the big kid, I didn't know their names. They were shouting to each other, circling around on their bikes, doing small tricks. One of the big kid's friends would make his bike hop back and forth. Another would swerve his front wheel, standing up tall on the pedals. The road was quiet, and after about a minute, the group moved into the road, riding around the parked cars. Guys, as we are reading creepy stories, I think someone, part of my family, just got up from bed. Interesting, but I can't tell. Anyways, we're going to keep reading the story, and let's hope that there aren't any secret invasions being planned out over here in this household. Anyways, it was going about a minute. The group moved into a road, riding around the parked cars. It was a peaceful morning, about 11 o'clock, and the boys were cheering. One of them made his bike hop up onto the pavement, spinning the handlebars around as he did so. Not a single other sound broke the summer day. And that was the longest run-on sentence ever. I watched the big kid and his friends doing the tricks for a moment, and then turned to look at the window of the video rental store. Now an actual period. It's a miracle. The window was full of posters, and I was curious to see what films they were advertising. I looked from one to the other, barely noticing when the sunlight dimmed somewhat as a cloud passed in front of the sun. Next slight brush of wind. Felt a bit colder, so... Why does it keep saying Dorothy Gale? I know this is intentional, but this is just like... Weird, I don't know. A little bit colder, so I wrapped my arms around myself and went for my mother when I heard one of the big kid's friends cry out. The truck must have taken a turn on the road too fast. I didn't see it turn, but when I heard cry, turned to look and see it tearing down the road. It was a huge truck, massive, towering, and ferocious. Its carriage smashed into one of the cars on the far side of the road. The boys in the street started to turn and run, panicked in their steps. One dropped his bike and ran on his feet instead, screaming at the truck's brakes, suffocating his own scream. Big kid didn't move. I don't know why he didn't move at the time. I realized now that he was rooted on the spot by fear. His shirt whistled around him as he stared at the truck, eyes wide, mouth open, scream echoing from his mouth. Tried to raise his hands to cover his face as if his thin arms would defend him from a monolithic 10-wheeled truck that was charged out of control towards him. He was screaming and screaming and screaming. The truck bore down from the street. Even though it was almost 30 foot from where I was standing, it felt like the air had hit me in a hard gust. As it charged down on the big kid. The truck didn't even collide with him. It simply poured over where he stood, his body buckling underneath it, folding like it was in a paper. That's some weird wording, man. I'm misspelling, too. His head at the height of the top of the wheels was tore through. There wasn't much blood, but the force of the truck colliding with the big kid ripped the boy's head from his shoulders and sent it hurtling across the road. Big kid's head struck the road, and suddenly it was nothing more than a hunk of meat, like a prop in a movie. I wasn't screaming. I couldn't. My throat simply wouldn't make any sound, except for a series of wheezing gasps as I tried to pull enough air into my lungs. Couldn't scream because I couldn't breathe. George Floyd! There was screaming in the air. Dorothy Gale again. This is getting very obnoxious. Couldn't figure out what was screaming. Then I realized it was the head. The big kid's head swaying. The big kid's head, like from Fortnite. Just like a grown-up version that's just mouses. Swaying lightly as it lay on the side of the road in the gutter, emptying his last sounds from the ruin of his throat. Awful scream that rattled from the severed neck just for a few short seconds. The truck had stopped where it was, its brakes, bringing it to a stop all too late. But beneath its wheels, the big kid's body twitched for a few moments more. His arms playing out the last moments of his muscle memory as he tries to flee around in the empty air above his shoulders. The witch kept a collection of heads. She changed them and would wear a different one depending on her mood. After a few short, terrible seconds, the movement ceased. The screaming stopped. The big kid, who had less than a minute before being a living person, was rendered into pieces of unmoving matter. Human meat, broken apart and empty. My mother ran from the bakery over to me and pulled me out of the way, hoping that moving me out of the scene would push what I'd seen from my mind. But it wouldn't work. Closed my eyes, but the image didn't go away. I could still see the big kid's head. That side of his face ripped and caved inwards like a desert ball. His eyes in the wrong place and his mouth open as he let fall the last echoes of his scream. Dorothy, of course, had fled from the witch's twitching, lurching body in her collection of screeching heads. She had run away and escaped the horrors. I wasn't quite so lucky. Some things I couldn't escape from. That would hold me in place and exist in space between the blinking of my eyes. Next chapter, Poison, the Gnome King, which is misspelled as Nome. Why is he green? It kind of looks like the rock monster from the Neverending Story. The powder of life, Dorothy was able to throw together a mass of assorted items in the witch's tower. A sofa and a moose's head and other random junk, and brought it to life. Creating an assorted mishmash of a creature, it was called the Gump. The Gooch, and like Jack Pumpkinhead, was a jumbled homunculus of items. Dorothy flew away on the winged Gump, flying across the deadly desert. I just heard a weird noise coming from outside, but I'm not going to go investigate right now. The deadly desert, a massive sand at the border of Oz, which, if you so much as touched the sand, caused you to turn to sand yourself. Several of the wheelers pursued Dorothy, and when their wheels touched the sand, they collapsed. Their bodies yellowed, cracked, fell apart, their bodies sifting in the wind, the lines and curves of their faces shattering and breaking apart. The Gump rips apart in the air, its wings breaking, and Dorothy and her friends crash onto the mountain of the Gnome King. Again, misspelled. A sinister creature formed of living rock, the Gnome King was played with austere and stern decorum by Nicole Williamson, a Scottish actor who forged his way from many respected Shakespeare roles on stage and screen before his death in 2011. Williamson also played the doctor from the hospital back in Kansas. Guys, are you recognizing any repetition in this particular story? I think I am. That both the sinister doctor and his beastly assistant had been incarnated in Oz, actors and all. Makes me all the more sure that the dark and sinister Oz of this film is but a flashy of Dorothy's memory as she drowns in the river during that storm. No, she doesn't drown. No matter how many times I try to remind myself of the story, I keep thinking that she drowned. I've seen the film many times as an adult, and yet each time I watch it, I find myself thinking, as she falls into the churning waters of the river, it is here at this point that she drowns. I know in my conscious mind that she doesn't, but each time I think back on this film, I remember Dorothy slipping beneath the thrashing waves, her skin wet and cold, gasping for air, drowning beneath the weight of the water. No, Dorothy does not drown. You're repeating yourself. That's not the story in the film. I keep remembering the film directed. How do you mess up spelling differently that bad? Differently. I keep thinking that she drowns, but she doesn't. She doesn't drown. Dorothy doesn't drown. She goes to Oz and rescues her friends who have been captured by the Gnome King. She goes to the Gnome King's treasure chamber. She doesn't drown. Where she has been turned all of her friends to ornaments. She doesn't drown, and she brings them back to life. She doesn't drown. She, little Feruza Balk, in her first film role, she didn't drown. She went on to be Stacy in American Next History. She didn't drown. She brings them all back to the Emerald City, and the Gnome King dies. She didn't drown. The evil witch Mombi, she is captured by the heroes, but the Gnome King dies. Dorothy's companion, the talking chicken called Belina, she hasn't been mentioned until now. Way to stay consistent, am I right, everybody? And instead of a comma, it's a period. Belina drops an egg into the Gnome King's mouth. The Gnome King, at this point in the film, having becoming... Wait, doesn't that mean her conceived children are being sacrificed in the Gnome King's mouth? And to kill him? What? What in the world? Gnome King at this point in the film having become a gigantic creation of living rocks, gags, and chokes. He harasses the words, eggs, poison, and crumbles. His entire body breaks apart, slowly. Chunks of rock falling away, taking his face with it. Eggs, poison. Eggs, of course, are not poison. But what if you add a type of poisoning? Then they do. That's not always the case. You have to think of different possibilities. In the film, they are only poisonous to the Gnome King. I never did understand why, and when I was a child, I didn't even realize it was a condition purely to the Gnome King and not something that would affect any of the other characters, human or otherwise. The statement was simply a proclamation, a warning. Eggs! Poison! Whilst his face turned to rock, churned to boiled, and fell apart like pebbles. Poison! My mom served me a plate of scrambled eggs for lunch. This was 2 weeks before we moved to the city, away from our village home. I had lived in a small village for my entire life. We had no more than 30 buildings and a single main street with its local shop, pub, schoolhouse, and church. Surrounded, as we were, by farmland, a large number of our local produce was agriculture. Local beef, pork, and eggs. Pushed that plate away. Not hungry? Asked my mother. Shook my head. Poison. I found the nest during summer. It was in the roots of an old oak tree near the back of the church hall. It had been built by some of the stray chickens who had nestled down amongst the gnarled and twisted old roots of the rotting tree. I found it one morning while I was on my way to school. It had been raining the night before, and my rubber Wellington boots were flecked with mud. It was the sound I heard first, a bleating cry. I stepped through the soggy grass and leaned closer, peering through the shadows of the old tree roots. The nest was wet and full of dirt. 2 chicken eggs sat in dirt, their surfaces glistening from the rain. The third egg lay in pieces, and bits of it. The infant chicken had been born too early. It was premature and half-formed. Its body looked like a wet mess of string. Its skin was oily and black and seemed to be made of muscle fibre. Not fiber, fibre. Or whatever the word's supposed to be. I don't even know. Oh, I know! That's horribly misspelled. Also, by the way, if there are any criminals or intruders that are going to be going inside of this house and they can clearly hear me going at it, just yelling about this story, and they're armed or whatever, why aren't they coming in here? I mean, it's possible that that's going on right now. So might as well get prepared with my handy dandy. Give me a moment. My handy dandy. What's this brand called? I forgot. It's not labeled. This green Glock. That's not even a real gun. Anyways, I'm gonna keep this in my hand just because you're not even gonna see it. It just looks funny from my perspective of view, but whatever. Let's reload this also, by the way. I know there's ammo for this toy somewhere. Oh, it's already... I'm just gonna leave it in there. It said it was too big for its neck and hung lambly to one side. Its eyes opened far too wide. It was twitching as if on a string, trying to breathe, struggling to live. The rest of it was only partly there. It was a premature birth, a foetus of a creature more muscle and tissue than life. Its egg had cracked and spilled the chick into the world, rejecting it. Poison! We didn't have a cafeteria at school. It was too small a building. Instead, the local store would send a van to the back of the schoolhouse, where teachers would collect our meals and bring them into the gym hall, which also doubled as the auditorium. Despite it being significantly too small to qualify as one. We sat, ate our lunches. Those who got our lunches from the school van and those who brought a packed lunch together. My mother had made me some ham sandwiches, with the crust cut neatly off. I sat with 3 other kids from my class. Chris was a Keenan. What is it with Keenan? Keenan, football fan, would usually rush through his lunch in order to finish early so that he could hurry into the yard. Kick a ball around for a while. Josh was a quiet, bookish sort of, have long hair and sort of a set of strong braces which shone each time he smiled. And then there was Gary. Wait, guys, someone moved. Someone literally moved, I swear to God. I'm gonna go investigate. I'm done. This is getting very creepy. I know. It can't be my dad getting sparked right now. You know what, I'm gonna take the controller. Because that'll prove, if there are criminals in this house, if I have it recorded on here, and there's a live stream going on, and I somehow get murdered, there's gonna be proof that I got shot. Like, there's no escaping it. You just have to, like, get the parents, or my parents in this case, just take them this recording, take it, or put it at around the end of this live stream. Right? Just play it back, and there you go. There's the proof of the murder. So if I go out there, they can't even kill me. They're even armed because of the fact that they're going to be implicated in this. Alright, let's go. Let's see who's out here. It's completely dark. In the living room. I don't know where this one is. There's no one here. Where's that noise coming from then? My grandpa is in the other room. And now I just barely realized that probably none of you even heard that, because even though I tried to take the microphone that I connected with me as I did that alongside with the controller, I don't even know if the radius even works to that extent. I don't know. This is a very weird situation. You guys probably just I just like went to the living room, and you guys more than likely probably didn't even hear anything that I said. Even though I really attempted to get that mic and take it along the ride. And yes, I was able to, but I don't know if the radius is going to work. Or whatever however it's supposed to work. I don't know. I'm losing my marbles here. And I'm already transforming into a crazy person slowly but surely. So I don't even know what I'm saying out loud. It makes sense in my head, and we're going to go along with that, okay? Good Lord. I don't even know if that radius crap is even a thing. Probably just taking it from my rear. Good Lord, this is a freaking mess of a situation. There's weird noises outside. I'm thinking there's criminals out and about the neighborhood. While reading a creepypasta recommended by one of my real good friends online about the Wizard of Oz, and it's freaking horrible. Okay, so we were on Gary. And then there was Gary, who didn't speak much, but followed the rest of us around quite eagerly. I chewed on my sandwich for a while, not really speaking. Chris was talking eagerly about the football match. that he'd watched on the television last night. I didn't care about football, and his descriptions of kicks and goals seemed almost like an alien language to me. Same. Took a bite off his sandwich, continued to talk, spraying bits of food as he did so. And I turned to Josh. Who's Josh? Wait. Misspelling, man. I said Josh. And because of the horrific misspelling, I didn't even know his name was Josh. I turned to Josh, wanting to tell him about the news that I found. I told him about the chick laying squirmingly in the muddy ground, gasping for life. Josh shook his head. All chickens are little when they're born, he said. I tried to explain that it wasn't simply a baby chick, that it was a half-formed and dying. I was only a child and would have formed the description properly. At best, I could explain that I had been born wrong. Chris took another bite out of his sandwich with a soft coughing sound. Josh said that maybe a fox had found the nest and was eating some of the eggs, and that maybe it had left the dead chick behind. I tried to explain that this might be possible, and Chris coughed again. I turned to look at him. His face looked wrong, brighter and puffier. He coughed again and again, louder, and began a motion towards his throat. A few other kids from nearby turned and noticed as now it's not even Chris anymore, it's just Crisp. Coughing became more insistent. He dropped his sandwich. Once he had got from the lunch van, it fell open, the slices of bread separating to show the creamy white shade of its contents. Egg mayonnaise. Chris tried to stand up, but couldn't, tripping as he did so. Josh rushed forward, trying to slap him on the back. Help, he shouted. Chris was clasping at his throat now, his face flushing from a pale red to a deeper, more blood-like shade. He was growing frantic and began to panic. He was wheezing for air, the breath trying desperately to fill his lungs. But he couldn't. Without any air, he would drown. Choked to death. Dude, now the restroom's making noise. What is going on in here? What is up, man? I knew that was killing him. It was the poison, the eggs in the sandwich. The teacher was running over, but Chris had fallen to the floor at this point, his rasping gasps for air filling the small hall. He twitched, thrashing for air. Skin turned a darker shade of red, and I thought about the chick, which was doing the very same. I grabbed the teacher's arm. It's the eggs, I said. Green eggs and ham. Kinda eggs, I said insistently, my eyes stinging as I felt tears in them. The eggs, they're poison. Chris was taken to a local doctor's clinic, where they found the obstruction in his throat. A large piece of eggshell, almost the size of a small coin, which had burrowed its sharp edge into the side of his throat. I still don't think the film was cursed. The whole cursed movie thing doesn't work, not in reality. May have been the director's only movie, but that doesn't mean anything about it was unusual. I don't think the video I watched was haunted. No, this definitely wasn't a movie that was haunted, it was me. By this time she goes back to Kansas, Dorothy's journey is over. She has found her rightful heir to the throne of Oz. Hope to reclaim the world. I learned that the hospital burned to the ground during the storm. The doctor died in the fire, burned to death. The Gnome King died, so did the doctor. Both characters, both played by the same actor, met the same fate. Convenient writing, everybody. But Dorothy was home, and she was wiser and more confident now. Her sadness was gone. She could carry the memory of Oz with her forever. I wondered if that was her curse as well. That poor little Dorothy Gale would forever return to Oz. I saw on the road where the truck had struck and killed a blonde-haired kid. This was about a month ago. I was in the city for business. I had just finished a new project, the shooting of a new film. When I was 12, I watched a movie called Cinema Paradiso, a classic of modern Italian movies. It follows the story of a man who grows up in a small village and to who the local cinema has a major impact on his life. He goes on to grow up and become a respectful film director. There are similarities between our lives. When I had finished my 5th feature film, I'd begun to wonder just what kind of influence the films I had watched as a child had on me. How they had shaped me into who I was. The character in Cinema Paradiso is bolstered by these. They give him strength and a means of escape. For me, there was this one film that terrifies me, and that's what brought me back to the street where the big kid had died in the truck on accident. It was only coincidence that had brought me here. I had 2 weeks to go until editing would begin on the film, and I needed a break. I would have cleared my head. The editing was due to take place in our main studio, but by sheer coincidence, my hotel wasn't too far from where the truck accident had occurred. That evening, I walked to the street, and I thought it would maybe look the same. I didn't really know what I hoped to find. I didn't want to drown out my memories. Maybe I just wanted to see them one last time in order to say goodbye. The video rental store was long since gone. The bakery was still there, though. The young man behind the counter told me that he couldn't remember a video rental store being there on the street ever since he had moved to the city, some 7 years ago. Time had changed. I had expected to still see the marks of the tires from the truck on the road. I didn't. No black scorch of burned rubber. I'm hearing noises again from outside. And no dash of blood in the gutter where the head had landed. Am I becoming schizophrenic? That's not part of the story. I'm just saying this. There are some creepy noises outside. And that is a fact. See, it changed. I had moved on. Only my memory remained. There was only one last place I had to go. My home village in Cornwall, I thought it was Cornwall, had changed perhaps more drastically. I drove there in my white sedan, and when I pulled into the village's main street, I realized that time had ravaged the place far worse than any tornado could. I was determined not to let the weight of the time dissuade me from what I intended to do. Though I parked my car and looked around. I tasted the air and looked around. I drove through the smooth hills which were once full of wheat, but were now empty. My Kansas was gone. The air tasted different. This, I thought, was my own return to Oz. The post office was shut. It had closed many years before. The small corner shop was now a Safeway, and even so, it was a small one with only a single checkout. I went to the local pub, which I had never done when I was a child here. The man behind the bar barely took notice of me. All around me, the people seemed old, as if history had chewed on them and let their wrinkled faces nod. I didn't see any children here. The bartender told me that there weren't really any young families around here anymore. No work around here, it seemed. Oh my god. Only the old people who had once worked the farms, waiting for the dust of the earth to reclaim them. Being in the village was painful. I felt like a relic, something that the past had forgotten. Time had moved on. I had moved on. The village had not. It had struggled. It had lost. Burp again. Oh my god. I don't want to stay for too long. I knew I wanted to make this quick before it became too painful. Before the ghosts of my memories began to hurt me. I left the pub and started on my walk. The school was the closest, so I went there first. It was a poor decision. The building itself was barren. The sign at the front with the school's name that had once been boldly etched on it had been taken down. The building was abandoned. Without children to teach, there was no use of the school anymore. I learned from the man who owned the local pub that the hall where Chris had choked on a broken piece of eggshell so many years ago was still occasionally used for village meetings. The classrooms had long since been abandoned. I walked around the building, peering into the rooms. They were all barren, emptied off furniture. No desks, no chairs. One held an old blackboard, its surface covered with dust. When I got to the church, I realized before I stepped into the yard that the old oak tree was long gone. I found an older priest with a shock of dirty, white hair tending to the front of the church. When I asked him about the tree, he told me that it had caught a disease several years before and was cut down. I walked into the yard and surely enough, found a dry old patch of ground where the tree once stood. The ground felt harder than the soil surrounding it and rose in a steady lump like a despoiled grave. The old farmhouse had been demolished. It had been concreted over as if to present anyone else from beating here. At the foot of the hill, a large square patch of gray concrete was almost lost amongst the tall grass. I almost stumbled across it because the years had pushed the details of the location from my mind. When I found a patch of concrete, I half expected to find a small plaque as well. My booty plaque. Perhaps a dedication to the 4 children who had been murdered and buried there. There wasn't one. The concrete itself was cracked and old by then, with bits of weeds and long grass peeking its way through like nature's own fingertips. It was almost, I thought, like the world wants to forget. I felt tired. The journey had been painful, bittersweet. Felt that I had made my homecoming. Felt the sadness that it would bring. I wanted to leave soon. The memories were too strong. Ones that were so powerful for me, but that the rest of the world had done its best to forget. I had made my journey, or so I thought, but I wasn't done just yet. The sun was starting to set by the time I reached the river. I don't know what brought me there. I had no idea what guided my steps. I'd forgotten that the village had a river. In the daylight, though, the river might look beautiful, but with the sun starting to dye the sky red and slip down towards the horizon, made the undercurrents of the water look dark. My feet had brought me here, almost unbidden, as if I was following a trail that was laid out for me a long time ago. This is where my broken, ruined yellow brick road leads me, and that's when I remembered. This is where she drowned. I don't remember it all at once. The images, eyes wide in terror, the water splashing over her skin and making it glisten, her mouth full and unable to take in enough air, her short black hair slick against her scalp and in utter disarray. The water kept washing over her face, the dark cloak of the current covering her for a few fleeting moments before she broke the surface again, only to dip back into its icy embrace again. Repetition. I was on the bank of the river. I was clasping onto her arm, but it was cold on a winter's night, and her coat was too wet, and I was wearing gloves, and she kept slipping. I couldn't hold on. I couldn't get a good grip. I wasn't strong enough. I was only 6 years old, and she was 4. The river had her. The river held her in its grip, and the water was like fingers, and I had a better grip on her than I ever could. She was crying, shouting for me to help. The water was weighing her down and stopping her words from escaping. She was drowning, and I was panicking. I was meant to look after her. She was my sister. Oh my God. This is a twist. I was her big brother. I was meant to protect her. I was meant to look after her. She was drowning. She'd fallen in and hit the water with a splash, and that splash was so loud that it had broken the world. That I'd forgotten. Maybe not forgotten, but I think my mind had forced a memory out and knew I couldn't cope with it. Not when I was just a little boy. I remember my parents in their tears in the ambulance I was called, and my parents telling me over and over that it wasn't my fault. But what? I was still that little boy who made himself forget that he was standing on the riverbank, clutching onto the girl's arm as she was drowning. This, I realized, was why I'd come here. I needed to make myself remember. I had to find the source of my fear. Remember what it was that had kept this moment from my mind. She drowned in the river. She drowned. I don't remember it. I'd made myself forget. And that memory had seeped out into the movie. That, I realized, was my secret. I kept it all locked up inside me, but the memory had found a way. My little sister's ghost wouldn't be forgotten. Each time I thought of that damnable movie, each time I tried to remember Return of Oz, I remembered Dorothy Gale drowning in the river. But it wasn't Dorothy. It had never been Dorothy. It had been my little sister. She was my ghost, not some sinister skulking figure that thirsted for revenge. She had been there always in the shadows, haunting me until I made my own journey into the past, made my own return to Oz. That film was important to me, and I knew it now. I'd never been free from it. Even when I tried to say goodbye, when I spoke my lost little sister's name on that riverbank, I knew that she would follow me forever. Couldn't leave her behind. Couldn't lock her away again. Return to Oz bound us together forever, like the Rick Astley song. Because my mother, who had loved Judy Garland, had named my sister Dorothy. The story was interesting once it started going on more and more, but it still sucked. The story still sucks, man. It's something can be entertaining and it can still be a terrible product, right? This is one of those cases. That was complete trash, man. I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find any redeemable qualities after that. No, I'm going to be doing one final one, and then we'll continue all these suggestion stories at a later point in time, and if we have more, we'll just keep going on and on and on, and I guess that could be a possible formula for the show moving forward. Maybe? I don't know. I'll think about it. But now we can do the strangest security tape I've ever seen. Which actually isn't even like on a creepypasta wiki. It's on Reddit. On r/nosleep from 13 years ago. And the actual original user is deleted. Okay, the strangest security tape I've ever seen. I work at a gas station in rural Pennsylvania. It's a boring job, but it's pretty easy and it pays alright. A few weeks ago, this new guy started. I'll call him Jeremy. Jeremy is weird. He's about 25 or 26, and he hardly speaks. But he's got the creepiest laugh I've ever heard. My boss and I have both noticed this, but it's never been a problem. So so there's not much we can do about it. Customers have never complained about him. He's always done his job very well. Until a few weeks ago, anyway. That's when things started going missing. Employee theft can be a problem at any business that sells consumer goods. There was only one person working at the time at this gas station. It's a pretty small place. About 2 weeks ago. Okay, guys, this is just going to be a perpetual thing where I just keep burping. So, apologies. This isn't professional in the slightest. About 2 weeks ago, my boss started noticing that we were short on motor oil. At first, it was a few containers at the time. Then entire shelves and boxes from the back room. Pretty soon, entire shipments would be gone the day after we got them, and would always be right after Jeremy's shifts. My boss has checked the security camera tapes from every single night he worked, but he could never catch him in the act. Jeremy would lock up at closing, then the motor oil would be gone the next day. My boss usually takes the tapes home with him to try and catch Jeremy stealing, but his daughter had a softball game last night, so he asked me to watch the tape for him. He offered to pay me overtime under the table, so obviously I took that offer. There are 3 cameras, so he gave me 3 different tapes to check. I figured it would be a long night, but I'm trying to save up for vacation, so I really needed the money. I took the tapes home, popped them in an old VCR, and sat back. 2 days ago, the last time I worked, Jeremy started at 4 p.m. Everything seemed pretty normal at first. Counted up his drawer, switched off with the girl who was working before him, and waited for a customer. First person that came in was Mrs. Templeton. The timestamp on the video read 4:03. A regular. She picked up her cigarettes in a newspaper and paid with a $20 bill. Nothing unusual there. For cigarettes in a newspaper? It's overkill. Next customer was some local guy named Ron. He drives a motorcycle, usually comes in every few days. Filled up his tank, got a bag of beef jerky, paid with his credit card, and then left. Next was some guy with a cowboy hat. I'd never seen him before, but we got plenty of strangers passing through, just like at any gas station. He got $40 worth of diesel fuel, paid with a $100 bill, and went on his way. Sat back inside. The only thing more boring than doing this job was watching someone else do it. My boss's offer was enough to keep me watching, though. So I put the tape on. Everything seemed pretty normal. I had a feeling that if Jeremy was stealing motor oil, he knew we were suspicious of him by now. I didn't expect him to be dumb enough to let us catch him on the camera. Things stayed boring and routine until about 5 o'clock. At 5:03, Mrs. Templeton came back in. She must have forgotten something. But she didn't. She bought the same pack of cigarettes as before and the same newspaper. She paid her for number 20. That's odd, I thought. Then again, she's a little absent-minded. I thought Jeremy should have told her she already got her smokes, but it's not against the rules to sell somebody the same thing twice. That's when Ron came in again. He bought another tank of gas for his motorcycle again. I later checked the outdoor camera because I thought maybe he had another car he wanted to fill up, and the same pack of beef jerky. He paid with his credit card. Again. No big deal. I figured this was just a weird coincidence. Mrs. Templeton's forgetful and Ron probably owns more than one Harley. That's when the guy in the cowboy hat came back in. I felt a chill run down my spine. Don't get diesel. Don't get diesel. Found myself whispering to my empty living room, but he did. He got $40 worth of diesel fuel and paid with another $100 bill. Every move he made was identical to his first visit, right down to the way he scratched his nose before he walked out. And either this guy is rich, owns a lot of trucks, and just moved to town, or something really bizarre was happening. I kept watching. Or, by the way, I don't think I really need to announce this, and it's probably none of anyone else's business, but, I just farted right now. I'm so sorry, man. This is a disaster. Imagine you were doing this for, like, a business, and you're just, like, burping and farting all crazy. This isn't exactly the most intelligent persona to go through when you're doing something like this, so what do you do for me? I'm awful. Hey, that's the story. Every customer for the next hour was the same as before. Every single one. I was seriously freaked out, and then at 6:03, maybe you have the tape looped. Fix it. Mrs. Templeton walked back in. She bought her cigarettes and newspaper again, and paid with a 20 again. I thought I was going to lose my mind. I only watched another half hour before I started fast-forwarding through the rest. It was all the same. Every customer would come in at the exact same times, exactly 1 hour apart. Now I know what you're thinking. That sneaky MF Jeremy had messed up our tapes. He had run a loop on his first hour of business over and over. That wasn't the case. There are windows around the cash register area that the camera covers, and I watched the sunlight fade as time ran on. Jeremy's routine didn't loop over. He swept, he mopped, restocked, and did all of his duties exactly how I would expect. But the same customers kept coming in. I was panicking at this point. Something was seriously wrong with what I was seeing, and I had no explanation for it. I skipped ahead to when he locked up and walked onto his car. He hadn't stolen anything, but I kept watching just to make sure. I fast forwarded one last time to about midnight. At exactly 12:03, out of nowhere, Jeremy's face pops up on camera. I don't mean he moved his head into view. I mean that 1 second his store was empty and the next second his face was all I could see. He wasn't looking at the camera, he was looking at me. I was sure of it. I screamed and fumbled for the remote. By the time I grabbed it, he was gone, just as soon as he had left. One frame he was there, the next he wasn't. My hands were shaking like crazy, but I popped in another tape. The outdoor-indoor camera shows the back area. By the cash register. Guys, now I'm hearing the trash can. This is creepy. No, never mind. It's my mom this time. It's not me. It's not intruders. We're good. We're good, everybody. Okay, I'm back. I have to I have to get back on track to where I was, but okay. So I have the explanation for right now and all the weird, creepy noises. It was just my mom, so nothing out of the ordinary. But when she wasn't here, and then I went out. What was that? What was that, man? Okay, where was I? I'm gonna find it because I went back to like. Wait, hold on. You know what? I'll just go back to a little bit. The other indoor camera shows the back area by the cash register, and would be able to see how he got up and put his face in the camera like that. I skipped ahead at 2:03, but there was nothing. I would have been able to see him standing on a chair or something on his table, but it wasn't there. I didn't see him enter the store at all. After he left, it was like he wasn't really there. There's no security code and no alarms were triggered that night after he locked up. What I did see, however, was that at 12:03, the motor oil vanished off the shelf. All of it. Same as Jeremy's face. 1 second, it was there, and the next it wasn't. I turned the tape off and went to bed, but I didn't get a wink of sleep. My body is exhausted right now, but my mind is racing. That tape was undoubtedly the creepiest, most disturbing thing I've ever seen in my life. I woke up in a few hours. No, I woke up in a few hours. What in the world? Wait, I'll be right back right now. Or I'm back. That's only one error. Everything else, that's just mispronunciation. Only one error. This is, so far, good when it comes to the department. So, nice. Working a few hours. My boss asked me to bring the tapes back in and let him know what I found. But really? What am I going to say? Jeremy works the night shift tonight, directly after me, and the plan is for my boss to come in just before I leave, and I confront him with me. And I'm supposed to be the one who caught him stealing. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I suppose I have to show my boss the tape, so I don't want to watch them with him again. I never want to see something like that ever again. Okay, this one. It broke its momentum. I can't get the image of Jeremy just smiling directly into the camera out of my mind. It was just the creepiest look I've ever seen on another human being's face. Anyway, I'm going to try again to get some last minute sleep before I have to go and deal with this. I'll let you guys know what happens. Update, 2:49 p.m. Updating from my phone. Apologies in advance for errors. My boss just finished watching the last of the tapes. I told him what to expect, but you really can't prepare someone for something like that. He's scared out of his mind. And Jeremy is due to come in at 4. We got a little over an hour to get our stuff together, but neither one of us knows what to say to him. Is he just an effed up guy who likes to steal motor oil and scare everyone? Or is he someone else? I don't know if this is crazy, but does anyone think he could have anything to do with the time loop? My boss said he's never noticed anything like that in the other tapes, but the way he popped up in this one made me think he knew I would be watching. It's like he wanted me to see what he could do. Like he was showing off or something. The way he smiled into the camera was just like a little kid showing you a sandcastle he just built or something. I don't know, it probably sounds insane. I sure feel the part. I'm going to talk to my boss some more. We have to calm ourselves down and figure out how to handle this. I'll update again tonight, but I have a really bad feeling about how this is going to play out. Update, 4:33. No sign of Jeremy. Tried calling him, but his phone has been disconnected. We're calling the police. Update at 5:53 p.m. No sign of Jeremy. Tried calling him, but his phone has been disconnected. We're calling the police. Oh, crap. Okay, 4:43, 5:43, 6:43, 7. All the same message. All by the same hour division. I am under the belief that this building is haunted. This isn't part of the story. I'm just thinking, that's my guess. It's haunted, or there's like some simulation thing going on here. Update at 10:58. Okay, so no loop. Holy SHIT. Repeated 4 times ad nauseum. I just gotten home, and so my previous updates. Things make less sense now than ever. Here's what I can tell you. I went to work. Jeremy never showed up. My boss and I decided to call the police, as you're well aware. And when I picked up the phone to call, though, the sun went out. I kid you not. That's what I saw exactly happen. Apparently, I blacked out for exactly 5 hours because when I looked at the clock, it was 9:33. I think I got stuck in Jeremy's time loop, and then I snapped out of it the exact point I blacked out. That makes sense. But that's when things got really weird. My boss was right next to me when I blacked out, ready to corroborate my story to the cops. When I came to, the phone was in my hand, but it was dead. Not even a dial tone. My boss is still right there, but he wasn't moving. He was standing up, but frozen. I looked at the clock again, and it wasn't moving. The second hand was stuck on the 12. It was 9:33 exactly. The clock on the register computer screen wasn't moving either. My phone was frozen. There was even a customer at the register waiting for my boss to get him cigarettes. I'm betting that would have been his 5th pack of the day. I got out of there. Didn't lock up. Didn't turn the lights out. And sorry, guys. I didn't grab the security tips I put on the internet. Believe me, that was the last thing on my mind. The gas station is on a major highway and cars were parked all along it. Except they weren't parked. They were frozen. The people inside it were sitting still as wax statues. I got in my car and prayed that it would start. Thankfully, it did. About halfway home, time started up again. The static from the radio turned to music like it's supposed to be, and from what I could tell by listening to the host talking between songs, no one noticed the time freeze, or whatever it was. I was the only one. Well, I'm sure Jeremy noticed it as well. I still have no clue where he is or what he's doing. I'm hiding in my room and calling the police again in the morning. I don't know if I'll ever get through to them before, or if I did, whether they took me seriously. I'm scared for my life at this point. I'll update tomorrow. If I can. Final update at 10:33 a.m. Oh. Hmm. Finally fell asleep last night around 4. I have no idea how I did it. I guess exhaustion finally got the best of me. This morning I woke up to my phone ringing. It was my boss. He'd been calling me since about 6. Woke up when time turned back on last night and immediately called up the cops. They came by to see what was wrong and he told them everything. The police around here are all small-time guys. They were more concerned with the missing motor oil than anything, but my boss figured he would take it as long as he had their attention. They decided to go looking for Jeremy. We keep all of our employee applications on file, and since Jeremy just started working here, his was easy to find. They checked the address on it and headed over to his house. You're not going to believe what they found. The address Jeremy listed on his application was an empty lot, or at least now it is. There used to be a house there, but it burned down in 1993. Being a small town, almost everyone remembers that fire. A family of 4 used to live there way back when. Rumor has it that they had an estranged son who they never really talked about, but I can say for sure that it was true. No, if that's true. What I can't say is true is that after an insurance investigation, the fire was ruled an arson. The entire house was soaked in oil and torched with a Molotov cocktail. The entire family was sleeping when it happened. None of them survived. They never caught the guy who did it. Rumor has it that when they tried to contact the estranged son, no one could find him. Anyways, my boss called him and told me, and I freaked out. Then he asked me to come to the gas station. What, are you crazy? I said. But he assured me that the cops were there with him. Then he dropped the bomb. The FBI were also in town and they were going to talk to me one way or another, so I might as well come in. It was about 7:15 and I wanted to go back to bed, but I figured I wouldn't be able to go to sleep much more anyway. So I went down. 4 men in suits greeted me and told me to have a seat. They went over everything 2 or 3 times until they got all the details down. I told them about Jeremy, the security tape, last night at work, everything. Finally, after I got finished, one of the agents said, "Oh Christ, we got another one in our hands." And then they made me sign a bunch of papers and I wouldn't tell anyone about what happened, so I can't say much more. I might be breaking the law just by posting this. So now I'm home, I'm not sure what to do with myself. That agent's words was the last... No, when I told him the story, are going to haunt me for the rest of my life. Anyway, I've got to go. I have some errands to run today and then I have to go into work to pick up some tapes. My boss and I think this new guy, Jeremy, he's a complete creep, is stealing motor oil, and I have to watch the security footage, see if I can catch him doing it. I have better things to do, but my boss is paying me overtime under the table, and I'm trying to save up for vacation, so I could really use the money. It's really pretty simple. The oil always goes missing right after his shifts. I figure I'll just watch the tapes, catch him in the act, and that will be that. You know what this whole story reminded me of? Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. There's this like one anthology series, and there's like this girl like named Rosemary. I need to look back into that. This is very similar to that. Like really, really, really similar. Wow. All right, that's gonna be it for now. I'm gonna change the thumbnail too. That one I made, it has Michael Barnett in it, so wonderful. Am I right, everyone? Dang, this was 2 hours and 10 minutes. Dang, our longest episode yet. So, see you maybe in like 5 days if that's the schedule, or maybe tomorrow. I don't know, or later today because in my time zone it's 2:18. So yeah.